Hello, Bernhard here. I'm an Agronomic Research Scientist. Many of us have began harvest, or at least have a harvest plan in place and will begin soon. There's a lot of things to consider when thinking about how early should you begin harvest. Delaying harvest and taking advantage of field drying can help reduce grain drying cost. However, during that field drying process, stalks and plant health begin to deteriorate, which can increase the potential for harvest losses. The notion that field drying corn often puts fields at higher risk of yield loss due to stalk lodging, dropped ears, mechanical harvest losses, losses due to increased disease or insect damage, that has been widely agreed upon. However, there's also the belief by many that yield losses can also be from a decrease in kernel dry matter after the plant has already reached physiological maturity, which is known as phantom yield loss. It is believed that during the field drying process, although the plant has reached physiological maturity and the kernels can no longer take up additional sugars, that those kernels do continue to respire and in turn will reduce kernel dry matter weights. Respiration is a process in which all living organisms undergo, in which they take in oxygen and in turn release heat and carbon dioxide. The loss in weight is the result of the carbon being released within carbon dioxide. Although seeds are considered a living organism and will continue to respire, the respiration process slows down significantly once the kernels have reached about 30% moisture, and will continue to slow down in drier and cooler conditions. In 2021, the agronomy research team implemented a trial across 3 locations to quantify yield losses associated with delayed harvest. We wanted to look at if there was changes in kernel dry matter which may have resulted in yield reductions. So we had 4 different hybrids that we harvested at 5 timings during consecutive weeks, with the first harvest timing being when all hybrids had reached physiological maturity. Not only did we take grain yield, but we also took grain samples where we can measure changes in kernel dry matter. 2 of the 3 locations lost an average of 0.3 of a bushel per acre per day, or roughly 9 bushels over 30 days. The other location, we saw no yield losses with delayed harvest. On average, there was roughly 0.6 of a bushel per acre lost per point of moisture that was dried in the field. Kernel dry matter weights did not change between the first harvest timing and the last harvest timing for any of the hybrids across any of the locations. So although we saw a reduction in yield, it is not because of reduced kernel dry matter weights from those kernels continuing to respire. There was no observed lodging or dropped ears in this trial, so the reduction in yield we saw was likely due to an increase in mechanical harvest loss with the drier grain compared to that higher moisture corn. While harvesting early captures more yield, that gain needs to be weighed against the cost of drying that grain. So think about the number of acres you have, the capacity to harvest those acres in a timely fashion, and whether or not you're drying your own corn or having it dried at a local elevator. There's undoubtedly different costs and risks associated with field drying corn, but a reduction in kernel dry matter is not one of them.